You know, some stories are so incredible they sound like fiction. This is one of them. It's the story of the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. It was supposed to be this glorious moment in human exploration, a huge triumph. Instead, it became one of the most unbelievable tales of survival ever told. So, the plan, cooked up by the legendary explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton, was, well, it was insane. He wanted to march 2,900 kilometers straight across the harshest, coldest, most brutal continent on Earth. Nobody had ever even tried it before. But as you can see, the Antarctic had other ideas. Before they even got a chance to step on the continent, their ship, the Endurance, was literally swallowed whole by the sea ice, leaving 28 men completely and totally stranded.
And that is the absolute core of this story. Think about it. No ship, no radio to call for help. No one in the world even knew where they were. They were just gone. So how in the world did every single one of them make it out alive?
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's late 1914. Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, is pushing south. The last people they see are these whalers on South Georgia Island, and they warn him. They say the ice in the Weddell Sea is the worst they've seen in years. But Shackleton, he was determined. He just pressed on.
What's so wild about this is that it wasn't some sudden, dramatic shipwreck. It was a slow, agonizing death. For 9 entire months, they were just frozen in place, forced to listen to the ice, groaning and cracking and splintering the hull of their ship day in and day out, until it finally just gave up. Can you even imagine that feeling? Just standing there, watching your ship, your home, your only connection to civilization, get twisted into firewood, and then just disappear forever under the ice? This quote from one of the crewmen, Tom McLeod, it just perfectly captures that feeling of absolute crushing despair. And you have to understand, their nightmare was really just getting started. See, they weren't on solid land. They were forced to set up a makeshift camp on a huge floating piece of ice, an ice floe, just drifting, completely helpless wherever the ocean currents decided to take them. Let's just take a quick inventory of what they had left, because it really shows how dire things were. 3 tiny lifeboats that were never, ever meant for the open ocean, maybe a month's worth of food for 28 guys, and just some flimsy tents pitched on ice that could crack apart at any second. They had practically nothing. Shackleton knew they had to do something, so their first attempt was this heroic, just back-breaking plan to drag the lifeboats, which weigh a ton each, across the rough ice towards an island. But after 3 grueling hours, they'd only moved a single mile. The plan was impossible. It was just a brutal, demoralizing failure. So that failure forced a really hard choice. Shackleton ordered every man to dump everything except for 2 pounds of personal gear. He tossed away his own gold coins. But Frank Hurley, the expedition photographer, he made a choice that literally gave us history. He smashed hundreds of his fragile glass plate photos, but saved 150 of the best ones, carrying them through the entire ordeal. The only reason we can see what they went through is because of that sacrifice. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, it did. Their ice floe, their temporary home, drifted right past Paulet Island, which was their only real shot at finding supplies. They were being swept out of the sea and into the open ocean, headed directly for a place called the Drake Passage, a notorious graveyard for ships. After a mind-numbing 497 days just drifting, their ice floe finally broke apart, and it forced them into those little lifeboats. They fought the sea for days before they landed on this desolate, uninhabited rock called Elephant Island. So yes, they were on solid ground for the first time in over a year, but they were just as stranded as ever. So, from this island, Shackleton faced this absolutely impossible choice. The closest bits of civilization were about 800 kilometers away, but getting there meant fighting straight into the teeth of the planet's worst winds. The other option? A whaling station on South Georgia Island, 1,300 kilometers away. A much longer trip, but it was the only one that gave them even a sliver of a chance. Yeah, just let that number sink in. 1,300 kilometers. Shackleton and 5 of his men squeezed into a tiny 22-foot open boat to try and cross the most violent stretch of ocean in the world. Anyone else would have called it a suicide mission. For 16 days? 16 days! They were hammered by hurricane-force winds and waves the size of buildings. They were always soaked, always freezing, completely exhausted. But somehow, against every odd, they saw land. They'd made it to South Georgia, but on the completely wrong side of the island, with a massive wall of mountains between them and help.
You see, the ordeal still wasn't over. The inside of South Georgia was thought to be completely impassable. No one in history had ever crossed its icy 10,000-foot mountain ranges. In fact, the next time it was crossed wasn't until 1955 by a team of expert mountaineers with all the modern gear.
And what did Shackleton's crew have? A rope and a small axe. That's it. It's just a stunning testament to their sheer willpower. They had no tents, no sleeping bags. They just walked. For 36 hours straight, they climbed up and slid down these treacherous icy peaks in one final desperate push. When they finally stumbled into that whaling station, they were completely unrecognizable, but they were alive. And Shackleton's very first thought wasn't about himself. It was about the 22 men he'd left behind on Elephant Island, just clinging to life, waiting for a rescue that might never come. The man Shackleton put in charge back there was Frank Wild, his loyal number 2. And his job might have been the hardest of them all, to stop 22 starving, freezing men from just giving up. He made them stick to a strict daily routine to keep their minds busy, but more than anything, he maintained this unshakable belief that Shackleton was coming back for them. And this was his ritual. Every single morning for over 4 months, as things got worse and worse, Frank Wild would tell his men to get ready because the boss is coming today. It was an incredible act of leadership that literally kept them alive. Meanwhile, Shackleton was in his own fight. He got a rescue ship right away, but the Antarctic winter ice was too thick, blocked. He tried a second time, blocked again. A third attempt, turned back by the ice. For 3 agonizing months, he was beaten by the elements, all while knowing his men were running out of food. But he just refused to give up. Finally, on his 4th try with a small ship he borrowed from the Chilean government, he found a way through the ice. As his ship got closer to Elephant Island, he saw his men on the shore. He yelled from the deck, "Are you all well?" And the most unbelievable reply came back across the water. "All safe, all well." Every single one of them, the entire crew of 28 men. After almost 2 years lost in the worst place on Earth, after their ship was crushed, after drifting for 497 days, after an impossible boat journey and an impossible mountain crossing, Shackleton did not lose a single man. In the end, Sir Ernest Shackleton isn't remembered for the mission he failed. He's remembered for the promise he kept. He set out to be the first to cross a continent, but he ended up achieving something so much greater. He became the leader who, against all possible odds, brought every single one of his men home.